What's up everybody? In this video I'm going to explain 3 reasons why I switched from the Santa Cruz Blur over to the Giant Anthem. Alright, so the first reason why I switched was actually because of money. Money makes the world go round, right? So I got a crazy good deal on the Giant Anthem. I got it for $800. That's the frame set, not the complete bike. So I got the frame set for $800 on Pink Bike, and then I was able to turn around and sell the Santa Cruz for $1,600. So basically, I got the Anthem for half price. Now that's one downside of Giant bikes. They usually don't have a very good resale value. So it's a pro and a con. Obviously, if you buy it brand new, it's going to be a con. If you buy them used, that's going to be a pro. So, but yeah, that's the main reason why I went with the Giant Anthem, was to save some money. Okay, so the second reason was the geometry, which actually I did not like the Anthem geometry as much as the Blur geometry. And really the main area was the reach. The reach of the Blur was around 490 millimeter, while the Anthem was down at 471 millimeter. Also, the seat tube angle was about a half a degree slacker on the Anthem than it was the Blur. But the one thing about the Giant Anthem is actually you can adjust the geometry much easier than you can with the Blur. So I started looking at a few options to be able to change the geometry of the Anthem to maybe work for me. And I ran across the Works Components website. That company makes a headset that actually can slacken the head tube angle of the Anthem by 2 degrees, essentially pushing the front wheel out about 24 millimeters further, which would make it more similar to the Blur. Now the Blur, you cannot do that. You cannot adjust the headset angle of the Blur by adding a headset to it, because the cups of the Blur are actually integrated into the frame. They're just one piece into the frame, while the Giant Anthem, you can actually tap the cups out and put in new cups there. Now if you're interested in this, be sure to check out my previous video I've done where I actually talk about making the head tube angle 2 degrees slacker on the Anthem. A lot of good information there. So by adding this 2 degree slacker head tube angle on the Anthem, it actually made it a little more trail worthy like the Blur. So the front center of the Blur is 763 millimeter, while the Anthem is 737 millimeter stock. Now with the headset, you actually put the front wheel out 24 millimeter further, so the front center becomes 761 millimeter on the Anthem, which is essentially 2 millimeter off the Blur as far as the front center goes. So very similar to the Blur with the front end of the bike, except you have the 67 degree head tube angle. In my opinion, it makes the fork have a little bit better angle when you're hitting objects, and it makes the fork work a little smoother. Now the third reason I went with the Anthem was actually to be able to carry 2 water bottles. And the Anthem actually is not originally set up to carry 2 water bottles, it's actually just 1 water bottle. But with the Line Components Holy Rail, I've done a video on that before, be linked right up here. And if you use that, you can run 2 water bottles inside the front triangle of the Anthem. While the Blur, you have to run your second bottle on the bottom of the down tube. And riding out in Blackwater when it was muddy and just sloppy and everything, obviously mud gets thrown up on the bottle. Now I'm not too worried about it as far as drinking it, because you can pull the top off and squeeze it. The issue was getting mud all over my hands. So anytime I wanted extra water, I'd reach down, grab the bottle, and then mud and dirt would be all over my hands, and then whatever I touched after that would be dirty. Not a big deal, but it's a little annoying. And actually I found myself not reaching for that second bottle just because of that. Because then I would get mud on my gloves, and then I would have it on my handlebars, and then on my shifter, my brake levers, anything I was touching would have mud all over it. So that was one of the big downsides of the Blur, was the second bottle was on the bottom of the down tube. All right, in closing, I'm going to talk about a few things that I miss from the Blur. The rear end of the Blur, in my opinion, felt stiffer than the Anthem as far as from side loads. It's not a huge difference, but the Blur felt a little more, trail worthy, I guess you could say, in the rear end. Now, as far as the Anthem, it was a little harder to set up the suspension, and initially I did not like the rear end of the Anthem, but once I took some time, messing with it and getting the sag just right and messing with the rebound, it was spot on. Now with the Blur, really you just set the sag and the rear end feels great. You really didn't have to do much playing around with the sag to get the Blur to work right. Another thing I miss about the Blur is a lower standover height. The standover height is 114 millimeters shorter, or lower I should say, on the Blur than it is the Anthem. So whenever you're having to dismount your bike or anything like that, the Blur is much better, especially when you're climbing and you hit a rough section there. You don't have to worry about crushing your jewels. And the last thing I really miss about the Blur was the threaded bottom bracket. The Anthem just uses a press fit style bottom bracket. You can get some threaded versions though from like Wheels Manufacturing and several other companies, but the Blur was great because it had the BSA, English threaded bottom bracket. That's not a big deal once you get everything set up, but if you are switching out cranksets or working on your bike, it's a lot easier to replace your bottom bracket when it's just screwed in. You can screw it back out. So very small issue that I miss about the Blur, but that was nice. Now, if I didn't get such a great deal on the Anthem, I would still be on the Blur today. But with all these modifications that I've made to the Anthem, I actually now prefer the Anthem over the Blur from the things that I've mentioned as far as the geometry and also the water bottle situation. So all of that actually, in my opinion, has given the Anthem a check above the Blur. Now, the Blur, you can add a longer fork on it, 120 millimeter fork. The only downside of that is obviously you're slacking your seat tube angle. You're also raising your bottom bracket a little bit, and it causes the front end to kind of wander when you climb. But once again, both bikes are amazing. They both have their pros and cons. Right now, with the modifications, I would lean a little bit more towards the Anthem. If you're going stock on both sides, then I would lean more towards the Blur. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video, found it beneficial, or at least somewhat interesting. If you could, be sure to subscribe to the channel down below, share it with any of your friends, and hit that like button as well. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Have a great day.